These commands I'm going to show you are all you need, not only get started with Git, but also to work with Git day to day. These are the commands that I use on a regular basis. Git clone, git initialize, git remote, git status, git commit, git checkout, git merge, git diff, git what changed, and git log. Git underpins almost every project. But what is Git? Git is version control. That means you can confidently make changes and have your work reviewed and not affect the mainline branch. Wow, that's a lot of words that I used that probably might be new to you, might not be new to you. The best way for me to actually explain it to you is to go through a real example. As you can see behind me on the left here, you have Hacktoberfest practice. This is a repo on my GitHub account where if you want to practice contributing to an open source project, you just have to edit the README and add your name alphabetically to the list. And that's it. But by doing that, you're having to fork a project. If you do it in GitHub browser, it'll do that for you automatically. You have to make a change. You have to know a little bit of Markdown, but there are so many examples there. You can copy one of those. You have to make a commit and push if you're doing it locally. If you're doing it within the browser, when you do a commit, it automatically does push to your fork and then will take you through to the pull request page. So by doing it in the browser, it does make it a lot easier for you, but you are limited to what you can do. If it's the first time using it, I highly suggest using the browser. The terminology will be the same, but a lot of it is done for you. And once you've done that process a few times, the terminology and the process will make more sense, and then you can do it locally. Doing it from the command line will give you the full flexibility of what you can do, Git-wise and coding-wise. However, it is a little bit more scary. So you may think, how can I get started by doing this on the command line? I have plenty of videos, live streams of me doing this via the browser, contributing to many open source and your open source projects. Today I'm going to be doing this all on the command line, but I'm actually going to show you only need single digit commands. And what do I mean by that? You need less than 10 commands to get all the work you need done. Yes, there are a lot more commands and a lot more things you can do, but 99% of the time you don't need, but realistically you need less than 10 commands to do everything, not just your job, but open source, the full works. So let's get started and show you those 10 commands. Git clone and git init, which is short for initialize. You don't use them both, you use one or the other. So if you are cloning a project on GitHub, you can see you've got the clone button here. When I click it, it comes up with the example. I highly recommend using SSH rather than HTTPS. You won't have to enter your password each time, but you do need to set up your SSH keys on locally and on GitHub. So you would copy the URL, and then all you would do is type git clone, and you would paste in the repository. And when you hit enter, it will clone it. And locally, in the folder that you're in, you will have a folder with the project and all the history and all the branches, because Git is a distributed version control system. So you can work completely offline and then sync when you're ready. So you will have a new folder called Hacktoberfest Practice. But what happens if you want to give it a different name because you want to prepend it with the user? Then after you type git clone and the git repo URL, then you would just add another parameter, which would be the folder name. So now if I go Hacktoberfest Practice, it will, and I hit enter, it will be called the file name that I have given it. So it's entirely up to you how you do that. But let's just say you're not cloning a repo and you want to create the repo locally and later on sync it up to GitHub. Then you can also do that. So that can be done if I create some space here. So if I make a directory and just say git example, and then I go into that directory, then if I do a git status, it's obviously going to error. It's not a Git repository. So all you have to do is git init. And now it is a Git repository. You can see it says Git, and you can see I'm in the master branch. So I can do git status, but there's nothing available yet. So remember, it's git clone or git init. One or the other, depending on what you're doing. But you may be thinking, well, if I clone the repo, then I'm connected to the repo on GitHub automatically. What we call the remotes have already been added. But on this new repository, if I type git remote, which is another command that is very useful, -v for verbose, I have nothing. This repository I can commit, I can create branches, I can merge in branches from mine locally, but I cannot push or pull. I cannot sync it up with remote because it hasn't got one. So now if I clone that repo that you see on the left, my SSH keys have passwords, so that's why I have to enter that. I navigate into that directory now, Hacktoberfest practiced. If I go into that repo and type git remote -v, you'll see origin, push and fetch, because a pull is the same as fetch and merge. It's just combining two commands. The origin, is the name of it, is given to GitHub. And you can add other remotes as well if you wish. If you had it on Bitbucket, you could then do git remote add Bitbucket and the name. Let me show you that. So if you had, the repo could be anywhere. It could be on another computer on your network. It could be a friend's computer, as long as you have access to it. But to add a remote, you would do git remote add the name of the remote. In the example above, it's origin, which is what Git does by default. But say if I had, I don't know, Bitbucket, or if I was doing GitOps, it might be development, like develop, for example. And then you would put the URL, so git, etc., whatever the URL to that place is. And then once you add it and do git remote -v, you will not only have two for origin, you will also have develop or production or anything else that you have on there. I highly recommend going through pull requests to do those sorts of things and using CI, but that's another story. So that's how you would add a remote. The initialized project that I set up, I can add a remote to that, or I can add more remotes to an existing one. And we do have a Discord channel, so feel free to join us in the Discord channel and let's continue the discussion between videos and between live streams. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe below, and share the video with your friends. Maybe they'll be interested too.